to you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost.
Amen.
Ecclesiasticus is not a book we read often, but it is a reading this morning that has an incredible message for us. From Ecclesiasticus, let me read again to you. He, meaning God, has placed before you fire and water. Stretch out your hand for whichever you wish. Before a man are life and death. Whichever he chooses will be given to him. Fire and water, life and death. Whichever he chooses will be given to him. We hear in the beginning that there is no fire. It was never God's intention that fire would be encountered by his creation. From Genesis 2, 8 through 14, and I'm reading from the Message just to make it a little bit more palatable this morning. Then God planted a garden in Eden in the east. He put the man he had just made in it. God made all kinds of trees grow from the ground, trees beautiful to look at and good to eat. The tree of life was in the middle of the garden, also the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river flows out of Eden to water the garden, and there divides into 4 rivers. The first is named Pishon. It flows through Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of this land is good. The land is also known for a sweet-scented resin and the onyx stone. The second river is named Gihon. It flows through the land of Cush. The third river is named Hiddekel and flows east of Assyria. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Nowhere in the creation story do we hear of fire, but we do hear of water. We hear that when water covered the earth, God spoke and land was created. Out of water, something was created that man might live on it. And in the Garden of Eden, water was placed to nourish, to revitalize, to allow for growth in God's creation. We first have to look at the two entities and their nature. Fire, by its very nature, destroys, consumes, it brings death. Water, by its very nature, restores, brings life. We hear about about fire in Luke's Gospel 49 through 53. Jesus said, I've come to start a fire on this earth. How I wish it were blazing right now. I've come to change everything, turn everything right side up. How I long for it to be finished. Do you think I came to smooth things over and make things nice? Not so. I came to disrupt and to confront. Fire changes things. It consumes things. Fire is judgment. Water, on the other hand, revitalizes, restores. We hear this from the Gospel of John, the 7th chapter, the 38th verse. On the final and climatic day of the feast, Jesus took his stand. He cried out, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Rivers of living water will brim and spill out of the depths of anyone who believes in me this way, just as the Scripture says. Fire and water, two very different things, are held out for us by God. And we hear in Ecclesiasticus, it is our choice. We can choose. And let me be very clear up front. not choosing is choosing. There is no middle ground. There's no middle ground with fire, and there's no middle ground with water. With fire you get burned, with water you get wet. There is no in between. Fire is hot, uncomfortable. It leads to us to be anxious, uneasy. Water is cool, soothing, brings comfort, peace. Fire burns, water soothes. Fire consumes everything in its wake. Water revitalizes. If you look at the two, fire and water, nothing can live in fire. Plants can thrive in water. In water is a vast array of aquatic life that gets its very vitality from water. Look into a fire. Nothing lives. Everything is consumed. Fire eliminates oxygen. It uses up oxygen. It takes it out of the room. It is the essence that we need to live. It takes the very thing that we need to exist from our existence. One of the primary ingredients in water is oxygen, the very thing we need. In it, plants live and produce oxygen for us. In water, God has allowed animals to adopt so that they can take oxygen from the water. Two very different attributes. Fire is life-taking. Water is life-giving. Fire divides. If you've ever had an opportunity to drive through the countryside and see where there's been a wildfire, you can see the difference between how land can flourish and how land can be barren. It divides the good from the bad, the fertile from the not so fertile, the productive from the non-productive. I had an opportunity many years ago to drive through the Bronx with someone. I was working the Bronx. It was not a wonderful experience. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. But I was riding through the area that was heavily hit by the riots. Block after block after block had been consumed by fire. It was an empty shell. Nothing lived there. And then when you go on to other parts of New York where there is life, vitality, you see the difference that water can bring. You see, fire divides production from non-production. Water consolidates, makes things possible. Fire removes things from the face of the earth. Think about the things that you own. If a fire hits, nothing will be salvaged. If water comes, some things will be saved. Fire removes. Water protects. Fire is totally unpredictable. I wish George Pigler were here today because he could tell you a story about how he decided to have a controlled burn that suddenly became uncontrollable. Took out a barn and a tractor. And you can tell him I talked about him and he'll appreciate that. Fire is an element that we cannot control. We can't put it in our hands. We can't put it in a cup. We have to be conscious and always concerned about it leaving the confines in which we have it. We can't freeze it. We can't cool it down. Fire is fire. It has a mind of its own. Water, on the other hand, follows a path, often gently. Fire rages, water flows. Fire consumes, water envelops. Do you see the difference, folks? Now, as we look at the metaphor of fire and water from Ecclesiasticus, and we ask, how does that work for us? What's the application in our life? Well, let's look at the world. The world, my friends, is on fire. It is the very division that Jesus talks about in the Gospel of Luke. The fire that is in the world divides the wheat from the chaff, those who would follow and those who don't. And by the way, those who decide not to follow but not to be part are consumed in those not following. Fire consumes everything. We live in a world that is about consumption. Buy, get, acquire, go, do. Consume everything that we have and are and ever will be. It is Satan's way. Use you up, redirect you, consume your very thoughts that they can't be soothed by the water of your baptism and the Spirit of God. Friends, we who've been baptized in the water with Jesus Christ have been called to follow his path, to not be consumed by the fire of the world, to live into the peace that comes from Jesus Christ, to live with the breath that is given to us by the water, not to have it sucked out by the world that lives by fire and fire alone. My friends, fire is the tool of Satan. Water is the tool of God. Let me read to you from Revelation, 7th chapter, 17th verse. John writes this, "Then Jesus told me, these are those who come from the great tribulation, and they've washed their robes, scrubbed them clean in the blood of the Lamb. That's why they're standing before God's throne. They served him day and night in his temple. The one on the throne will pitch his tent there for them. No more hunger, no more thirst, no more scorching heat. The Lamb on the throne will shepherd them, will lead them to spring waters of life, and God will wipe away every last tear." My friends, nothing can survive fire. Nothing can survive the air of consumption that the world is about. We can fool ourselves and say that we can somehow straddle the middle, live in the world, and live with God. But I will tell you, you cannot do that successfully. You will either perish by burning, or you'll die of thirst. But you won't be nourished. It is only by giving ourselves to Jesus Christ fully and completely, by living for him. And this is the point in which many of your minds are turning me off, because that's not something you necessarily want to do. Father, you say that all the time. Well, I must mean it then, mustn't I? You have the choice. It's not me to make for you, or God to make for you, but each of you are given in front of you fire and water. We have been given 2 hands, not 3. And so there's fire here and water there. There's not a neutral ground in the middle. But we love to live in the neutral ground. And it is in the neutral ground that we are susceptible to the scorching heat that is the world. God has placed before each of us. Fire and water. God has placed before each of us life and death. He has given us free will. Not to choose either or, because we are His creation. And we hear from Genesis that from the very beginning He surrounded us with water that we might flourish. So, my friends, you see the only choice that your will has this morning is to reject the fire of the world. Which will you choose? Because you and you alone will be accountable